Hey, how's it going guys? My name's Daniel, aka HashLips, and welcome to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be looking at how to get a collection of images and make them into NFTs on the Solana blockchain. Now I have to add that this is actually an updated version of a video that I made a while back. If we go down, we can actually see the video over here called Create a Solana NFT Collection Ultimate Guide for the DevNet, and there's also one for the main network. These videos are great and informative, and it especially explains how to actually build the images and the metadata part that I would briefly go over today. So, I highly recommend you still watching these to get a understanding from where this video originated from, and it will give you some more backstory. However, in this video, I'm going to be showing the most recent updated version of doing the same thing. But the thing that I won't be covering is the creation part of the artworks. Instead, I would highly recommend these 4 videos over here. These are different types of videos on how to use the HashLips art engine to generate the NFTs, generate the images, and generate the Solana metadata needed for this tutorial. These videos give you some great insight on how to use the art engine in different ways, but it's geared towards Ethereum metadata. In this video, I'll show you how to do that simple switch, but this makes these videos very relevant. Alright, let's go ahead and see the updates and why I need to create this new video. In the previous video, I used Metaplex, and specifically their Candy Machine tool. But that previous video was geared towards the Candy Machine V1. In this video, we'll be covering Candy Machine V2, which is their latest product on creating NFT collections. Now, we can also see here on Metaplex's products that Candy Machine is depreciated and really is a stability level of 0. And that's why this video is important. It's important to note that the reason why we use Candy Machine with Metaplex to deploy our NFT contracts or our programs is because it makes it easier for us to do so. Solana blockchain uses Rust, and unlike Ethereum, which uses Solidity, which you can just copy a smart contract and deploy, the programs work a bit differently when it comes to Solana, and Metaplex just makes it way easier for us to deal with that. Alright, so let's look at the 3 main concepts or things that you'll need to get this job done. The 3 things consist of images, the Solana CLI, and Metaplex. For the images part, we'll need some metadata to go along with the images, giving it some descriptions in the form of JSON files. Now, I can recommend the HashLips art engine. It's a cool tool that you can use, and like I said, I explain exactly how to do this process in these videos. So if you go to this link, you can go to the releases section over here and make sure you download the version that's explained in my videos. Click there and then download the zip file. The next thing we'll need is actually the Solana CLI. Now the Solana documentation over here, if you go to the command line instructions, we can install the Solana tool. Here we go. For Mac and Linux, you can use this. And if you go down, you can install Solana for Windows. I have a Mac, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this and then just simply install it through a terminal. Let's go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and open a terminal. I'm just going to open a new terminal like this, and then go ahead and paste in that command that we just copied. Hit enter, and the shell should now go and download the installer and install the Solana CLI, the tool that we're going to use to create for us a set of keys. It's important to note that at this point, this has nothing to do with Metaplex. This is simply Solana itself and its tools that we'll need. But when we look at the Metaplex documentation, I'll show you this step in there so that you can also reference that as well. So the installation is now complete, and it tells us that we can copy this command below If you look at the documentation here behind the terminal, it says that you can copy that and then close the terminal, open a new one, paste that in there, run it, and then we're going to run Solana -- version. And if you see a version popping up, then you are good to go. Now you can also save this in your paths and so on, but this is just in the instructions, and I want to show you how you can do that because most people get confused at this stage. So we can now use the CLI. So the reason why we installed it is actually to start by creating for ourselves a file system wallet. I highly recommend reading through all the documentation here at your own time. It is good to understand the tools that we are using. However, we can go to the wallet section over here, go to the command line wallets, and we are interested in creating a file system wallet, a JSON file that will keep our private keys safe and also give us a public key to use. Now I've already opened the documentation here, and this is what we'll need to do next. So just to give you some explanation on what we're doing here exactly, you can see we have got paper wallets, hardware wallets, and file system wallets. The file system wallet is basically a private key that's generated for you, and it works much the same as your Phantom wallet, where you have your public key that's displayed and it has its private key. This one is just going to live on our system, but we can still send it Solana from the main network to that wallet, as well as some DevNet Sol, which we can acquire. So let's go ahead and run these commands in the terminal, what they are explaining over here. Looking at these instructions, we can see they want us to make a new directory. We don't necessarily have to do this. I'm going to save my private key on the desktop for ease of use, for this tutorial, but you can basically create this Solana key wherever you like to. So what we can do is open the terminal again and then start typing. Remember, if you can run Solana and get the version, it will work fine. And just an extra add-on, if you've closed the terminal completely and you try and run Solana version and it doesn't give you Solana back, it's because it can't find it. Remember previously we had to export the path. Now I'm just showing you this again. You can add this path, in your file system for it always to be there so that you get access to Solana. I made myself a nice little helper kind of info text that we will actually append every now and then. The thing that I've appended here is the same command as this. The only thing that's different is that I specify my desktop location over here. So if we go and just have a look at this, I'm going to take this command over here to generate my new key on the desktop in the terminal. Make sure Solana is running and then paste the command and hit enter. The CLI will now tell us that this is very important information that we're going to be providing. It gives us the option to provide it a passphrase, and I'm going to enter my passphrase and hit enter, and then we can just enter it again, and there we go. So now when you see this screen, it means that your key file has indeed been created. So this will be now on my desktop, and I'll show you that in just a second. Important things to note here is that this is the public key. It's fine to share this, but no one knows the private key, and that information is living in that key pair file. That's why you should never share the actual file that's been generated with anyone. Okay, so if we take a look at what we have right now is on our desktop, we've got our key pair file, which has just been created. And here's the public key that is shown in the terminal. Now we also have the HashLips art engine that I've downloaded before. We haven't even unzipped that yet. We'll get to that in just a second. It's important to note that for some reason, if your terminal gets cleared or you want to know what your public key of this file is, we can look in the documentation and see that we can run this pub key function with the Solana CLI, pointing it to the key pair, and we should get our public key. So if we want to try this out, I can run Solana key gen and then pub key and then the location to this file. If I run this, it can give me back the public key, which is fine to share. I'm going to say it again. The public key is fine to share, but this file is not. Keep it safe, never lose it, and never share it with anyone. All right, as you know, I like keeping track of what I'm doing. So opening this file, and these are all the executions that we've done to this point, I'm also going to just put my public key in there so I don't need to call this function every time. Great, let's look at what's next. The next thing we can do is look at Metaplex and Candy Machine v2. Now, just want to add that I'm doing this in a way that I see as a constructive way of teaching, but this can really be done in a different order as well. You can first just download Candy Machine and then do the Solana, and you can do the Artworks way in the beginning, but I'm doing this in a step-by-step process so that you just understand the parts needed to do this. Okay, so let's go and check it out. We can go down to Candy Machine v2 and click on Introduction. Here it describes a bit of the Candy Machine and what it does, and feel free to read through this all. We can get clicking on Get Started, and right off the bat we can see here are the tools that's needed for this project. So the tooling we'll need is Git, Node.js, Yarn, and TS Node. Now, we're not going to install Git. I feel like it's not necessary if you are not a developer. If you are a developer, you will find Git very easy because you are used to source control. We probably don't need that because we will just download the repository in the form of a zip file. The next thing that is very important is Node.js. You can download Node at this website and just follow the normal installation processes for your operating system. After installing Node, make sure that you have some kind of IDE. I usually love using Visual Studio Code. It is simple enough to do what we need. So go ahead and download this if you don't have a code editor already. Okay, so we have skipped GitHub, but we have Node.js installed. We're going to install Yarn just now. I'll show you how to activate that, as well as TS Node. But before we do install these two, let's go ahead and download Metaplex's Candy Machine. So we're going to download this whole code base. So when you go to this URL at the top, go to the code, and then simply download the zip file. So now we've got the Metaplex code base here in the zip file. We now need to create a new folder. It's optional, but I like to just have a folder that I keep all my resources together. So I can say this is the Solana project, like so, and just drop all of these files in there. Open that up. And for now, I'm simply going to work with the artworks first. But before that, I would like to quickly install Yarn and show you how to activate that, as well as TS Node. So jumping back into the documentation, let's just finish the Metaplex setup. So I know we're going to create the artworks quickly next, but it's important for us to set up everything so that we can just run it. All right, so open a new terminal and let's run the first thing. We're going to skip GitHub because we already have Metaplex on our system. So we can run node -- version. And we can verify we've got version 16. The next thing that we need to verify is Yarn. Now, I already have Yarn installed, but here's a trick. If you already have Node installed, you can simply go to this, and then if you have a version greater than Node 16.10, you can run this command. Otherwise, if you have a version lower, you can run this command. I'm going to copy this because I know that my version is lower. Go back to the terminal, enter, and this should install Yarn or activate it. Now, if I type yarn -- version, enter, I get a version number. You can do the exact same. If your version of Node is above 16.10, you should only run this. Great, we've got Yarn successfully installed. What about TS Node? For TS Node, what we can do is go back to the terminal and simply run this command over here. This will use npm, which is the package manager from Node.js, to install TS Node, and this -g flag is saying that it's going to be globally installed. So I'm going to just say cool, enter, and it will install TS Node globally for me. I want to note something before we carry on. To finalize your Metaplex and your kind of candy machine setup, for Macs that use the M1 chip, there is some documentation over here that you can follow. It mostly involves, this process of installing packages with Brew, but this is something that I'm not going to cover here, but keep this in mind. You might run into some issues when you're running an M1 chip if you don't do this. Okay, perfect. Let's go and see if TS Node is installed. So what we can do is basically copy that, run it, and see if we have a version. And indeed we do. Perfect. Now our whole setup is complete of the dependencies. We can now start having fun creating the artworks and then taking those artworks and creating an NFT collection on Solana. Just to cover the last step before we go and create the artworks, we probably want to fund our Solana wallet that we created with some test sol. Now, I've explained the Apple M1 chip, and you can check through the documentations how to do that. We have already, downloaded the repo, so we can skip this clone and install Metaplex. We have already installed the Solana CLI and, created for us our own wallet. So this is just what this part of the documentation is explaining. There is a big difference between the main network and the DevNet. So if we were talking about the DevNet, which you'll see later on in this tutorial, we're going to be talking about the development network of Solana. If we're talking about mainnet beta, this is the main network as it is on Solana. Usually you'll test on your dev network, make sure everything is fine before you go and deploy to the main network. Next, they want us to set up a dev wallet. Basically generate a key pair, which we coincidentally already did in the beginning of this tutorial. It's the exact same process where we run this and generate our file. They just call theirs devnet, and we called ours, if we can recall, myKeyPair.json. Okay. Now we already have our key pair, so we can skip this step. But the next step that we'll need to run is Solana configure set key pair, and then the location of your key pair file that we've created. Ours is sitting in that folder. So the next step to do is to open a terminal, and I've got mine here. Make sure that you have access to the Solana CLI. So just run Solana version. If you don't see this, remember that you need to export your path. Okay, it's just very important to note that. But the next thing we can run is that command that we've seen. Now this command is the Solana set key pair, and then the location is specifying where this file is now living in my operating system. Once I hit enter, what happens is Solana changes its configuration to say that it's going to use this file as my true key pair on my system. Now we will still need to set the URL to be pointing to devnet, because currently it's pointing to the main network. This is something important because we want to test on the dev network and not on the main network right now. In order to start setting the URLs to a dev network, let's copy this command over here. Let's go to our terminal. Let's paste that, hit enter. We can now see that we've updated this to be pointing to the dev network, as well as this was updated as well. We can always use Solana get config to make sure what the configuration is that we are currently working with. That is good to note. Next, we can airdrop us some test Solana by putting in this command in our terminal. So Let's airdrop ourselves some to Solana. Hit enter, and now it's requesting for an airdrop. Fingers crossed that this works, and it did. Sometimes it doesn't. Just note that as well. And that is it. Now we have some test Solana. We can test if our balance is actually 2 by running Solana balance. So let's copy that, run Solana balance, hit enter, and indeed we have got 2 test sol. Now finally we're ready to go and make some artworks. So the next thing I want you to do is go and open this folder that we have constructed for ourselves. Let's first extract the HashLips art engine. Keep in mind, what I'm about to do now has nothing to do with Solana and Metaplex at all. It is a separate program that I'm going to run in order for me to generate some images and metadata that's acceptable by the Metaplex framework and Solana when it comes to NFTs. Okay, here we go. So go ahead and open Visual Studio Code, click on open, and find that folder, Solana project. And firstly, let's go and open this HashLips Art Engine project. Okay, so you should now be in the root directory of the HashLips Art Engine. If you don't see your in IDE terminal, then go to the very top, click on Terminal, New Terminal, and this will show up. The first thing we'll need to do is type in yarn. This will install all the dependencies needed to run this program to generate the artworks. This is the art generation part with the metadata. And like I explained, I'm not going to cover it in full. Rather go and watch these 4 videos and really dive into the inner workings and what's possible with this program. So I am going to cover it a little bit just to explain. How it generally works is you get your layers, which is separated in different folders such as background, eye color, iris, shine, and so on. These files and these folders have images in them with rarity traits. Usually you will swap these with your own folders and images to generate your artworks. And then what we do is we go to the source file, go to the configuration, and set up a bit of config here. And here you can see there's a Solana metadata section as well. Let's prep the configuration file for our artwork section to be custom to the Solana network. When generating for Solana, what we would like to change is the network section over here. We're going to change this to Sol. Then let's choose a new nice name for our project. I'm going to say this is the awesome cloud, just to make sure I'm not using anyone's name. But we are going to have the Awesome Clouds collection. You can go ahead and give your collection a description, and you don't have to change the base URI at all. The reason is Metaplex has its own way of providing and linking the images, uploading it to decentralized storage. Now, something that we can change in this section over here is maybe the symbol. To Awesome Clouds could be AC. And then for the seller's fee, this is kind of the royalty fee when a sale takes place. Here you can see 1,000 equals to 10%. So if you make this 100, this would be 1%. I'm just going to leave it at 1,000. You can provide an external URI, maybe pointing to your project, and then provide an address and a amount of percentage of shares that this address will be getting. In this case, it's 100%. You can also have more than one creator and then split the percentage. Make sure that this is a workable address that the funds will go to. So in our case, if we wanted to, I could potentially use my address that actually is going to deploy this contract and replace it in here and save the file. It's extremely important to always save this file. Now, if you want to learn more about the configuration, like I said, those other videos, as well as the previous guide of the Solana tutorial, will explain this because the metadata hasn't changed so much. The inner workings of Metaplex's candy machine has changed, and that's why I'm remaking this video. Now it's time to generate our NFTs. We need to make sure how many we're going to generate. I think a size of maybe 10 is perfectly fine. So change it and save the file. Then here we can see what scripts we can run. Now the one we want to run is generate. So we can go into our terminal and run yarn generate. When we run this, this will now start generating our NFTs as well as our metadata. Perfect, it looks like everything went successful. We can now see there's an extra build folder here with images, and this is how they look. It's these iconic eyes that everyone knows, and then the JSON metadata is here, starting at ID 0, and with a underscore metadata file, which we will delete in just a second. Before you delete this file, maybe save it somewhere else. It could become handy later on, but I'll show you what we'll need to do with this data just now. The JSON looks like this, and just make sure that everything so far is in the correct place, and it looks like it is. So now what we can do is close this off and actually close Visual Studio Code altogether because we are done with the generation part. We now have our NFTs, images, and metadata. So now we have generated our artworks and we know they are sitting here in the build folder. What we can do now is basically extract Metaplex and then get rid of the zip file. What we want to do now is actually in the Metaplex folder, create a new file. So let's go ahead and create a new folder and call this my assets, like so. I'm going to drag this inside of the Metaplex folder, and then I would like to actually take all the images I have, okay, and move it all the way down into this assets folder, like so. And we're going to do the exact same with all the metadata, this time excluding the underscore metadata.json from our builder. So move this downwards and actually drop it in there. Your folder structure should now just look like this, with the assets mixed together inside of the Metaplex folder. We are now done with the HashLips art engine. We're not going to need it again. And now we can open Metaplex in Visual Studio Code. Let's click on open and then find that file. So we have it Solana project, Metaplex. Click on open, and here we go. Your folder structure will now have your assets and the full structure of Metaplex. There's something I want us to have a look at right off the bat. We can go into JS, packages, CLI, and then here is an example candy machine configuration. Let's briefly talk about what this file is and also what each of these keys mean. This is essentially the configuration of your whole project. So if we go back to the documentation and go to the configuration section, here it clearly explains exactly what this means, as well as what data type we can enter. So before we go over the configuration, let's just look at the introduction of Candy Machine v2. It's important to understand the new features and where they fit into the configuration. Candy Machine now comes out with unpredictable mint indexes, which means that you won't be able to predict the NFT that you're going to get. It is good because some people, won't like it if their friend knew which one was the rare. They also provide us with whitelisting, but we will not be able to cover that in this tutorial because it requires us to create a separate token and link it to our project. Regarding the capture bot settings, basically now you can mint and fill in and prove that you are a human. And that's good because it means that the bots can't go and mint through the CLI, and but it also means you can't. So just be careful with that setting. I usually just tick that off. Then with this one over here, it just basically means that now you have the option to kind of hide and reveal your drops, but in the Solana ecosystem, it never has worked that way. So it's a nice feature, but we leave that turned off as well. Okay, so now we get to the configuration. Here you can see it has a bunch of keys with descriptions next to it, much the same as the keys in here, and we can now go through them one by one. Let's say, for instance, that we have to set our NFT's price here at the top. This is the price of each NFT. Let's say I value my NFTs and I want them to sell and start minting at 0.1 Sol. The next thing here, the number, is actually the amount of NFTs that's in your collection. In my case, remember, we actually created 10 NFTs with metadata. So there I'll specify 10. Regarding the gatekeeper, it's not necessary. We can turn this to null. And basically what this does is, if you look in the documentation, it deals with the captcha bot verification. You can leave it on if you want to, and just specify the network and so on. But I'm going to simply turn that off. The next variable is going to be our Sol treasury account. Now this needs to be a public key of any Solana wallet. This treasury account is basically the variable that will tell Candy Machine where to basically send the funds to once we mint. So we're going to be actually grabbing my Phantom wallet's address. It doesn't need to be the one that I've specified or generated here on the machine. So I can turn this, and this would be string, into that account. The next two parameters, SPL token account, is if you have like an alternative token to take as payment, and SPL token is actually as well, a public address to a token that it accepts as payment. These have to do with whitelist settings. And down here, we also get a whole section on whitelist mint settings that we're not going to get into, but you can enable that as well. We have a go live date parameter, which we can set. And over here, there it is. I'm going to set it to a day before today so that it actually kicks off immediately. But you can set this into a date in the future as well. Or I believe you can type in the word now if you just want to start it now. Regarding the end settings, it's possible for you to end your mint at some point if you just want to abruptly stop it at a certain date. You can check the documentation on what you want to set there. Generally, that's just left null to let it mint out. Whitelist settings is possible to set. This uses the tokens that I've spoken about before. There's some hidden settings which I've never changed, but I believe you can hide some of the information to the public, but that's generally not necessary. And then the storage is an interesting one. If we look at the documentation on storage, now we can see we can use IPFS, Pinata, AWS, and all sorts of wonderful stuff. I'm going to leave it at Arweave because it works, with Metaplex, and it just uploads it fine. But the rest of the variables going down and in this configuration has all to do with the storage. So for these variables, you can leave them as null if you don't have an alternative storage mechanism. Keep in mind that Arweave might be replaced by Arweave-Sol, like you can see over here. But currently, a lot of the community members still love using this, so I'm going to keep it to that. But later on, you might want to use this, depending if it's stable. I'm not saying it's not, but yes, just test it out, see what works for you. I don't want to make an updated video at this point just because of the storage mechanisms. So I'm going to try it out with Arweave, but you can choose which one you want to use. Cool. Then we have the two last ones over here. Leave them at false. These are generally some hardcore settings that you don't want to change, and I would just recommend leaving them to false because it has to do with the authority of the mint as well as mutability of your data. What it comes down to is this minimalistic configuration file, and this is all that it's needed to do a Solana drop. So you can also reference this, like I said, way here at the bottom if you just want to make sure what to set as minimal configuration. All right, let's move on and see the preparing your assets. Now we have already done this. We have moved it into a location where we have our JSON and the PNGs next to each other. If you can remember, if we go back to our file structure, here's the assets, not this one above. So there we go. And we've already prepared our assets like they say we should. Okay, so now it's time for us to create the candy machine. This is the part where we're actually going to create it and deploy our collection. Now there's a few things to note, and the first thing is that because we're going to upload the data, there is some kind of rent fee which you can get back. The rent fee is due because we're going to be uploading data, and it's kind of like reserving some space. There is a cost associated with uploading data to our Weave and kind of these estimations that is taking in consideration, but just have enough SOL to kind of cover that. Once your collection is done minting, you can claim it back, and also if it fails, you can just withdraw it, and you can check the withdraw section. But basically, we will need assets, some SOL balance, which we have, and we will need the configuration that we already set up. Next, we will need to run this command over here. It's important to note at this point, we are going to be uploading to the DevNet environment. How do we know that we are on the DevNet? And how do we know that we are actually pointing our Solana configuration to the DevNet? Well, in the beginning on the Get Started tab, if we go down, we can see that over here, we basically change this to the DevNet RPC. And if you are ready to do this on the main network, you'll simply need to set your Solana's configuration to the main network. And currently it's known as mainnet beta. Now there's sometimes different RPCs that you can set it to. You can just check it out over here. They also mention it here. And if one RPC service is working very hard, you can choose a different one. But basically, this is how it works. This is where you will change it before you run this function, or you run this command. If you can remember from the previous video, the reason why we're remaking this video, over here, you can see the difference between the networks and which ones to use. So maybe check this out if you need to. Also, just on a side note, please give me a follow and a like if you've liked this content to this point. I really appreciate that. Come and join the HashLips army and let's learn together. If you get stuck at any point, you can always go to hashlips.online and then go and join our Discord server. There are thousands of devs and moderators that will help you out if you ever get stuck or have any good questions. Regarding the mainnet RPC, I see they do recommend using a custom one. And where you can actually also look to find a custom one, setting it up is in the community documentation. Go all the way down. I'm pleased to see that HashLips is mentioned here. Very cool. And here you can see on RPCs, you can select one, maybe set one up and use that when you do the mainnet deployment. So what you'll then do is you will go and set that to your custom RPC link instead of this DevNet. All right, this link over there. For our purposes, we've set it to Metaplex's DevNet pool, and that is fine. Let's go ahead and run this command, this big command, and see how we can execute it and actually start the process of deploying our collection. Now the command we'll need to run is tsnode and then point to this file. In the code itself, if you go to the source directory in the CLI, you can see it's going to be calling this file over here. Now, before we even get into this, we need to install the dependencies. So you need to type in your kind of terminal. If you don't have a terminal, click on terminal here at the top and say new terminal. Then we're going to cd into JS and then type in yarn so that we install all the dependencies first. Now that this is done, what we can do is clear the terminal, pressing Command K. We can see that we need to run tsnode on this file. Now we already know where the file lives, and it's this one. So right click and copy the path. I can close that. And then we're going to run ts-node followed by that path. And let's type in upload --help. If you need help in any way to see what you can call on this file, you can type this in. And here we can see all the extensions or the kind of flags that this file gives us. The flags are explained here as well as in this section over there, but we'll quickly run over it. The flags are pretty simple for the upload function. We've got E for the environment, which is devnet, K for the key pair, which we have created that file for, and then we have the configuration that we've changed. C is for a cache, which we don't need to include, and then our assets. So let's go and fill them in. ts-node, and we're going to firstly copy the path of this file again. We're going to say upload, like so. -E for the environment is going to be devnet, and then -K is going to be our key pair file. Now there's the key pair file, and I need the path to it, so I already have extracted the path to this file. Paste that in there. -cp for the configuration, and this is this example file over here that we have open. So go ahead and copy the path, paste that in, and then simply leave a space and then go and get the assets file over here. So copy path, paste that in, and we're ready to go. Fingers crossed, and let's run it. So hit enter and let's see the magic happen. So here you can see that it says warning that Arweave storage, might be going away soon, which is fine. I just still use it because I don't want to use the Arweave-sol yet. But yeah, let's just leave it like that and see if it uploads our images and if everything is fine. Okay, so it looks like there's a tiny bit of a problem with the devnet currently, or something is up. Okay, so I've cleared my terminal and I've figured out that Arweave actually is giving me a lot of problems on its own. So I've switched to Arweave-sol. So I had to do that because it would simply not work with Arweave alone. And I'm going to also delete this .cache file and then run the command again. And hopefully this time we'll have a successful collection on the dev network. So let's run this again. Let's see what happens. It tells me on the devnet that arweave.sol will only store the files for a week, which is fine. And we have a success. We have successfully uploaded to the dev network. Here we can see successful is true. And all of our NFTs are now uploaded. It is good to maybe just save this data in our file. I just love doing that. So let me append this. And here we can see we've got the Candy Machine address. So the Candy Machine address is here at the top. And we can actually scan for this on SolScan. If we copy the address, go to SolScan, paste it in there, and search for it, we can actually see that our account will show up here. And yeah, here it is. So now what can we do? Well, let's jump back and let's talk about what happens if this fails for you on the main network. Maybe your RPC isn't efficient enough or whatever it might be. There is something we can do, and that is to verify the upload. So if you want to go to the documentation and something has gone wrong, you can always call this function again, basically specifying the network that you're on, the key pair, and you can leave out the example. But it will give you feedback on the number of NFTs that's been successfully uploaded. Okay, so now that it is done, we can do the UI. Like I said, copy everything from here up until this point at the top and just save this in an info section. If you don't do this and you forget to do it later on, then you might need this information again, which we are going to be using now in the UI. Specifically, we're going to make use of the public key as well as the candy machine address as well. So the next step for us is to go down in the terminal and actually go and set up the candy machine UI. It is sitting here under the packages folder. So just right click, copy path, and then CD into that. Then here we can simply go and say yarn and install the dependencies. Next, what we do is we open the candy machine, and here's a .env.example file. You can go ahead and remove the .example part and scroll up in the terminal or get this information of the public key over here from your saved file. And once you have it, go and paste it here at the top. Now that that's in place, what we can have is DevNet. If you have deployed this on main network, at this point you'll change this to mainnet beta as well as your RPC host to main network. But once you've set this up in the terminal, you can now simply run yarn start. Awesome. So now we have our app, our minting app is out there. It's running on this local host. We can check it out. We can connect our wallet on Phantom, but before we do that, we need to probably change the network to be DevNet. And now we can connect to our Phantom wallet. And then here we go. Notice how the mint button is grayed out. It means I don't have any Sol in this dev wallet of mine. Well, that is fine, and it means that I can just simply import the one that we were working with. And you can just go there and then open the key pair JSON, then go here to the drop down, add a wallet, and import private key. Now, when you do that, you can give it a name. I'm going to call this test and paste your private key in there that you got from that file. I'm not going to show my private key, but I'm going to do this. It looked like I just had to refresh the page, but I have my wallet linked up now. And this is our dev wallet. We can see there's 1.8 test Solana in there. I can click on mint. It would ask me to approve the transaction. And then it would mint my NFT. So I've minted 2 for the fun of it. There's 8 remaining. And if I go to my Phantom wallet and I'm still in the dev network, I can click here on my tokens. And here I can see that there's some unknown tokens. I don't know what those ones are. But here are my 2 awesome cloud NFTs. How cool is that? I want to end off this video by saying if you really struggle with anything or just want to have some fun chatting about dev things, come and join the HashLips server. We have a wonderful general chat where you can ask questions, some dedicated frequently asked questions. There's a beautiful announcement channel, lounges that you can hang out in. There's specific questions towards the programs that we've made, as well as a dev center. The dev center, as well as the artist center, is very helpful for devs who really want to help people out and maybe participate in someone's project. So if you need someone to help you out or you want to pay someone to do something, you can always go there. This is a free-for-all channel, and we try and facilitate devs that are curated, Solana dev services. There's unverified devs. Just be cautious with any of these kind of jobs and people that you get to help you. I will not be responsible if stuff goes wrong. You need to do your own due diligence and research and really trust the individuals you work with. But this is a platform for people to connect. So that being said, there's always help if you go here and ask. And lastly, thank you for spending so much time with me today. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you got to fill in some gaps and pieces from the previous video and this video, and I really hope my videos do help you. If you're new to my channel and you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and turn on that little bell notification It generally helps you to keep up to date with the latest dev stuff and just in general blockchain and development fun. So go ahead and do so if you really enjoy the content I make. Till next time, have a beautiful day. Cheers for now.